me as we get started. Is it gonna work? Yay! So, developer through and through and through. I build random stuff, really random stuff at Red Hat is what I do. I'm sorry about the flicker. I don't know where that's coming from. I'm not gonna worry about it. Java champion, Java of all the things. I do too much Dungeons and Dragons for my own health. Ridiculous things are my jam. All right, we're gonna talk about command line interfaces today, which is a new topic, but old topic. It's new for Java. Why are you guys all the way back there? So we know what CLIs are, right? We know some of them are local only. They're like grep and find. And we know some of them actually do remote interfaces like Docker and Git where they talk to remote services. And so even though it's a command line interface, I tend to still think of this as a client usually because you're doing client-y kind of things very often, right? When we talk about CLIs, there's some characteristics that you want for a badass CLI, for the thing that you like to use that makes sense. And some of those are obvious, like you want sane defaults, clear actions, unambiguous options. I think you've all been, faced with the option thing of doom, right? You want options that make sense. A lot of times people don't think about this as a design problem, but it really is. You want to know who your user is, what kind of thing they need, and make sure that those options make logical sense. There's conventions you should follow, what help should look like, for example. At this point, you should probably use color, but some people are colorblind, and now we have emojis. So think about using emojis, because people can read those even if they can't see the colors. It gives them good instant information visual. So that's kind of cool that we can do that now. Badass CLIs play well with others. Even if you want to make a CLI that's a really nice interactive experience, odds are because it's a CLI, they will shove it in a script. So you want to make sure you're using your standard out and your standard err in a way that's suitable for piping to the right place. You want to make smart return codes. How many people actually know what the return codes for grep are? There are actually like 0, 1, 2. There's a 2 that actually means something when you use it in a script. You can test for the value. So there's more than just 0 and 1. You want to be able to explain those, but they're useful for scripting if you want to be able to test it. And then the other thing you want to think about, and I'm actually not going to get into prompting today, but that is how and when you want to prompt for user input, when it should be interactive, when you want it to be, just like a batch mode. Who uses Maven? Maven, sometimes if you're using Maven archetypes, it will prompt you for the missing information, but you can also just say, just do the thing, and if it's not there, fail, right? Because that's what you use in scripts. So that kind of interaction is something else you want to think about when you're making a badass CLI that people want to use, that they understand how to use, so that you end up with something that people are happy with. So our goal today, I am not the best live coder, so you guys are just going to laugh at me a lot, and I'm going to try not to have any F-bombs. We'll see how well I do. We're going to try to use Quarkus command mode to create a badass CLI using some of the Quarkus, some Quarkus extensions, some CLI-focused extensions, and then just a lot of straight-up Java goodness. I am definitely playing Baking Show. There will be, as we go, I'm just going to jump forward because I want to get to a more complicated place, and you guys don't want to watch me type so much. So we'll skip ahead a little bit, but if you want to go backwards, or if you want to ask a question, please do. It's more fun that way anyway. So questions are great. I said already I'm a Dungeons & Dragons nerd. It was not something I planned for my life. It happened accidentally. I was a game master for my kids. I have handed that off. They are now running their own campaign, and I play with my sister every Sunday, and it's super fun. But my sister is not a technical person. I mean, she is. She's a civil engineer, but she doesn't know computer-y things. So I want to make something that will help her track her inventory, but that means she can't deal with running Maven and starting containers and doing a lot of extra prep. Just has to work, right? She's my user, so she's just got to work. And so there's some choices that I'm going to make. When people talk about Quarkus, for example, one of the most popular things you want to look at is how you compile to native mode. And that's really cool, and it's really easy, and it doesn't usually make a lot of changes to your code. But I'm giving this to my sister, and I want it just to work. which means I'm using an in-memory database that's going to back to a file, and that doesn't work so well. H2 and native mode are not yet friends. It might happen, but it isn't there yet, so we're not going to go to native mode. But that's a trade-off that I'm making because of my target user. I want this just to work out of the box for her. So we're going to end up with however many pockets containing however many items, and then in those pockets, there's going to be like how much it's worth, how much it weighs, and like as a whole, how big it is. Like volume sometimes matters and it sometimes doesn't because pockets are interesting. Some pockets are magical. So like if you have a portable hole, there is only a volume constraint. You can dump the entire world in there as long as it fits in the hole, which is cool. And then you fold it up and it's the size of a handkerchief. So that's magic. You guys, my kid is now texting me. That's brilliant. She's so cute. My 8-year-old now knows how to text her mom. So it's great. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how we create a CLI with Java. I am not going to go into huge depth with JBang. If you want to do scripting, like real loose scripting, but still use Jackson, because who wants to parse JSON or XML or any of the things that Jackson is really good at, you should look at what JBang does, especially if you already know Java, because JBang just says, you don't need a project, and you don't need Maven structure, and you don't need all the imports. Just write their Java code and it'll be fine. So if you want to write scripts and use Jackson Mojo and have fun with that, please check out JBang. It's really cool. In this case, I'm going to use JBang because it does some really nice things for installation. So I'll show you that. I'm also not covering JReleaser, but if you want to make a CLI that's consumable by the universe, JReleaser helps you put it in Homebrew and Chocolatey and all the places. That's a good utility. I don't use it myself because I build random things that are just basically for me because I'm a nerd that way. All right, so here's kind of what JBang looks like when it installs. So when it runs, these last couple lines are what's interesting because I will have, you can kind of see it's pulling from Maven directly. Right? So when I want my sister to use this, I'm not going to go through the overhead for my dummy project to put it in Maven Central because that's like permanent forever, and this is just my scratch space. The other thing JBang can pull from, who has ever heard of JitPack? If you haven't heard of JitPack, JitPack is really cool. It will take so it's like I can ask for a resource from JitPack in the way I would any Maven repo, right? You could just put JBang in your POM file, whatever. And it will, when somebody requests it the first time, it will build your project and serve the jar. JBang can pull from there, which means my sister can do JBang app install Erin's Crazy Pocket CLI, and it'll work. And she didn't have to do any of it. It'll download Java for her. It will install the jar for her. It will make the script. And she doesn't have to know any of that stuff, which is brilliant, because now she can write my Hacktastic. She can actually use my Hacktastic CLI, and she didn't have to know all the things. I'm super proud of her. She's learning Python, but Java's a little bit next, so we'll see. But this makes it really easy for me to create CLI that other people can play with, which is good for feedback, right? You want to make sure people like the CLI that you're making. Okay, what we are going to talk about in some depth is Pico CLI. Who's heard of that? Anybody? Pico CLI is really nice because part of what we want, again, is the self-explanatory CLI that has all the help that's useful, has options and parameters. And Pico CLI gives you annotations if you're used to that. There's a programmatic version too if you prefer that model. And it just helps you construct help. It does a lot of that work for you. It gives you nice mechanisms for declaring your parameters, declaring your options, saying which is exclusive and all that stuff. That's great. It also has a built-in generation of help. So if I use those options, it generates nice help for me already. It can do command completion for me, so I don't have to worry about doing that. I just run a thing and it looks at all the stuff that it's processed from my annotations and spits out tab completion. Hooray! So I don't have to do any of that. That's amazing for me. It has a convention for return codes. So I can now extend this, but like if it returns a 0, that's a success. If something fails and it catches an exception somewhere, it will already return a 1. And if my sister tries to put in parameters and she does it wrong, it will already do a 2. So like I don't have to do any of that stuff. It'll catch it all as part of its operation, right? That's convenient for me. I don't have to worry about it. It's baked in, and then I can just extend it if I want additional return codes that mean something. Again, that's to help when people use my shell, my CLI in their scripts, right? They can test to see if something happens. Okay, we're going to use Quarkus. I'm doing this because, of course, I have already created the project. But when you use Quarkus, Quarkus itself is a CLI. It's written with Pico CLI. It has help. It can create projects. And what it ends up creating when you use this nice command, it creates a project for you that already has. You can add an option if you prefer Gradle. It'll do that too. So it'll give you a project already that has your Maven wrapper, some sample source files. In this case, it sets up a CLI project, because that's what I asked for, that has that greeting command you'll see at the bottom. And we are going to use Quarkus dev mode. So Quarkus dev mode is interesting in that, have any of you used like Mocha for JavaScript? Right, so when you're running in Mocha, it just runs, right? And you just keep typing and it'll run in the background and run your tests, and it's a lot more interactive in terms of what you're doing and reacting to that. Quarkus dev mode is like that. And so we'll see. Now I have a known bug in there, so there's some wonky things that I have to do periodically. Okay, that's my reminder that we're flipping to code now. Now where is my mouse? Which screen am I on? Oh, good grief. Where am I? I'm using my iPad, and I'm using my other thing. Come over here, Erin. Please flip. So as I said, I have some places where I will fast forward. But one thing that I'm going to do now is I will start Quarkus dev mode. I can start it with a clean flag because, who knows what I left in there from when I was practicing earlier. And it will compile my code. I'm in the Quarkus project. It'll do the Maven thing. It's going to start a debug mode. It will run the CLI once. You can see this hello Pico CLI go go commando, because that's, I don't know who wrote that. It's ridiculous, but that's the default. I set this file up a little bit. I renamed it from that initial one, right? Because you guys don't need to see me do file rename. That's boring. So I've at least renamed it to Pocket CLI. I have some preferences. I like to say my main CLI has the CLI in it. That's my entry point. Future me will know what that means. I like using subcommands. And so once you have a bunch of subcommands, having something ending in command doesn't really help me remember which one is the main one. I like to take pity on future self. So you can see it's just kind of running down here. I'm going to come up here. We're going to I have an empty test file here. Now I'm going to show you how to write tests. Tests for CLIs are also important. They help give you feedback as you're adding things. Quarkus has a bunch of test infrastructure. So like if you create Quarkus test and you flag your class as a Quarkus test, it will know this is the usual server, the long running thing. And it'll start that, and it'll help you get your port and all the stuff and help you write your tests in a nice behavior-driven development kind of way. We're writing a one-and-done client. So we have a different kind of test. We have a Quarkus main test. And that lets our framework know we are writing a one-and-done kind of thing. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a test method with our annotation. You didn't pick that up for me. Why not? Yes, you did. You're just mad because I didn't do that yet. And there's an annotation we can use. You can see Quarkus test main that's going to do a launch. We're going to launch something with it. I'm going to give it no parameters. This is going to be a really simple test. Test basic. Oops, command. This is why I don't like code. I type everything wrong. I'm just going to save it. When I go down here, one thing I can do is I can say we have to toggle test output, and I'm going to resume testing. And it'll run my test. It didn't find that now because, of course, I did it in the wrong order. If I change something, it'll find it. It runs the test, and it now passes. Hooray. Now, one thing that this test is doing for me, it's running my test. I can still see that it's running there. It's implicitly testing against a return code. It's testing that I've returned 0. Now, if we flip back over, where did my mouse go? My daughter's so funny. Mom, answer me. It's great. It's awesome. Our kids are so hilarious, especially when they figure out texting. It's great. I love it so much. So we are, and the timing is brilliant. It's great. So anyway, so we're going to do a callable. My daughter is hilarious. She's my mini-me. Mom! It's awesome. So we're going to change this so that we actually return a return code. I'm going to use some quick fixes because I'm lazy. Please add the unimplemented method for me. Yes. And we're going to move this super fabulous, fantastic, important implementation here. And we're going to then delete this one because I'm lazy. And then we're going to return, let's return a 1. That should be broken, right? We return a 1. It should recompile the test, and you see it fails. And if I scroll up for why it fails, it's like, oh, because it expected a 0, but it was a 1. So this CLI test, I didn't really have to do anything, but it's implicitly testing my return code. So if I screw it up later, my test will catch it, which is good to know. It's good to catch your mistakes, iterate. Pico CLI has some constants that are useful, so we can do our exit code and say, yep, okay, we're going to return that. That's great. And then it'll run the test again. You can see at the bottom there it's passing already, so I fixed it. Yay. All right, so now I did not call my test, like my application is not reading, it's pockets. I'm going to call it pockets. And this mix-in that you see here, this option, this is what's bringing in help and version and things that are being useful for me. They're doing good things. The other thing that I'm going to want here, I'm going to do this a little backwards so that my stuff doesn't move around as we go. I'm going to set a scope. And this scope, I'm going to say this is a scope type. You'll see this here. We are going to do subcommands, as I said. And when you use scope type inherit, that means other things that I put here on this main command apply down there. So I don't have to re-specify to mix in help options. It just cascades down into the subcommands, saves me time. And so if we flip over, I got the standard help options, I got the thing, it's called pockets, I got my test. If I go over here now to this test, I'm just going to copy this because I'm freaking lazy. Let's just do that, it's faster. We're going to add a test method. Find my mouse. Okay, so here's our test method. It indented funny, of course. So this one is doing a little bit of a different flavor. You can see this Quarkus main launcher here and this launch result. And what I'm doing here is I'm launching this command myself. So when I use the launch annotation, it's running the whole thing for me, and I can get the launch result and look at the output, and that's great. This is going to run, it's going to launch the command for me, it's going to run it. I need to then assert the result myself, because I took out that part of the automation. But I can look at this output, and I can test that it contains usage. I have a little utility that strips out log messages, because you guys may have seen from the output earlier, there's timestamps and stuff in it that I don't care about. So I can actually check, just for sanity's sake, that -h and -help are actually both returning the same thing, and I haven't accidentally mapped stuff out to the universe to do something dumb. So if I save this, it'll run again. You can see 1 of 2, and I got my test working. So if I show what that result looks like, you can see now usage pockets. You can see -h and -help shown, -v version shown. That all was done for me. I didn't have to do any work for me, and it looks kind of nice, and I like that. Now we're going to flip a little bit. I'm going to fast forward in time here because reasons. We'll see how far we get. Anybody can look at this code, by the way. So I'm going to jump ahead in time. Why did my CL pockets test just get empty? I don't know why that just happened. Oh, because I went backwards instead of forwards. DN2, dumbass. Excuse me, I'm swearing already. This is bad. Erin, it's just the way it is. So one of the things that we like to talk about, you can see I added a little package here for I/O. So we're doing a text conversation with our user. And most of the time, at least if you're me, you do want a central place to manage that. Because, sometimes when you're writing app, you're like, dry, wet. Like, why dry is sometimes too expensive. But in the case of what I'm communicating to my user, I like being able to say, my messages are going to be consistent. I'm going to frame them the same way. I'm going to use the same symbols. And I don't like that sprinkled like Jimmy's all over the code base, because I just think that's yucky. So I called it a TUI to remind myself this is a user interface. I am working with my users here. future me will remember this. Some of these classes that I'm gathering and initializing, I've got like a default in case I'm testing this outside of pockets. I've got some defaults here for ANSI off. But PicoCLI is going to figure out, oh, this is a dumb terminal, or this is a smart terminal. ANSI is on or off. It understands ANSI code. It doesn't understand ANSI code. It'll strip it if it doesn't. It does that for me. It'll understand and create its own color scheme, which I can tweak, so that's great. One of the things you see that I'm adding here is the notion of debug mode versus a verbose kind of mode. Sometimes I might want more information, but we know if somebody shoves it in a script, they might want a briefer display, right, a little quieter. So I got some options there. I have methods for debug and verbose. I'm not going to use a logger here because that's ugly and I don't want to, and I'm having a conversation with my user, not with a log. So we're not using a log appender. You can see I have warn that makes a little pretty yellow emoji, and I have errors, make a little red stop sign. We will have more that come in over time, but this is how I try to get consistent with how I'm communicating with my user. So if I go back to PicoCLI, or my Pocket CLI, I mean. PicoCLI is the other thing. I'm going to add this. I'm just going to call it my text user interface, and I'm going to make a new one of those. It doesn't take any commands. It's a final. It has a default mode. That's great. But now I need to connect that to what PicoCLI has figured out. And this gets a little interesting. I'm going to also, while I'm up here at the top of the file, I'm going to add some options. And this is the encapsulation of those options for a debug versus brief mode, right? So we're going to have options for that. Not caps lock, single person. Let's get this. No, not comment. Really, I can type, I swear. So we've got options, and we're going to now, this is where I like forward logic thinking. I don't know all of you, but I hate doing the if not all the time, because it's like, that's just cognitive overhead, I don't like it. So I want my sister to be opting in. I want it to be quiet. Even though when I'm writing code, I want to be, is it verbose? So we're like opposites, but it's more natural for both of us. So just note that. I have a brief output as a forward-thinking flag, and a debug mode is a forward-thinking flag. I can get rid of this name. I don't need this anymore. We're not doing this. And my call, I'm going to do something a little different in this call method. We are going to, in this call method, we're going to kind of get ready for our future us. Where was that? Yeah, it's just to show usage. I got a command in there on the TUI to show the usage. So it's just going to show usage. I'm going to have to inject this back in a minute. So we'll come back and fix it. When we're creating this now, I've got the flags. I need to change how this is being initialized because I want to make sure that my TUI, because you know, you guys, who knows how setting up input and output streams is a real pain. You gotta setting system out, then putting it back and all the stuff, right? It's just a pain and you get it wrong all the time. So I need to make sure that my input and output streams are set. Then the commands run, and then if I have to do cleanup, that happens. So how do you do that? I mean, I didn't even make a main method. I'm not in control right now. Quarkus is doing magic stuff for me, and I'm not doing any of that. So PicoCLI has the notion of an execution strategy. And so I'm going to bring that over. This execution strategy has it takes as a, I'm just making this method to do it. It has the notion of a parse result. The parse result is the result of PicoCLI parsing what the command line was, mapping it to a spec, parsing the options, making sure they're valid. I'm not even going to get here if my sister typed in the wrong option. It's going to go out with the right error code, and I'm not ever going to see it. PicoCLI also has a couple different run modes. And this run last, so it's like if I specify a whole bunch of commands on the line, PicoCLI could say you could run the first one and then just bail on the rest, or you could run the last one. I'm using subcommands. I want to use the most. I want to use the last most, right? So you've got some options for how to do that. But this is basically, this method is saying, I want to do some initialization, then I want to run the command, and then I want to shut down. And I've got my hooks now to do that. I have some empty methods here that we're going to fill in. So with this parse result, right, which I get coming in here, I made a method, you may have seen it briefly, and I want the parse result spec, because this is kind of early. So here's the parse result spec. So if it's one of the sub-commands, it'll just work. I've got the debug flag. I'm going to pass that into the TUI, and this is where I flip my flag. So my sister said brief, I need verbose. It's one place I flip the flag. I know that I did it, but everything else is forward logic thinking, right? It's, for me, that's just way less bug likely. Future me likes that kind of stuff, because future me never remembers what I did. So that's what we have. And now we're going to need a run method. And this, the reason we need a run method is because we have to change how this is initialized. Instead of doing top command, we have to take the reins back. We're going to tell Quarkus, this is the main. You're going to come talk to me. And Quarkus will still say, okay, I will initialize you. I will make a static main method, because that way I still don't have to worry about the jar and the manifest and the main class stuff. Quarkus is still doing all that stuff for me, so I don't have to worry about it. We're going to come in here with Quarkus main, and I'm further going to say, I want this to be a Quarkus application. And that gives me another method to implement. And that method is called run. I think I know what that does. So, and it's going to return an int. I think I know what I need to do with that too. So here is where I'm going to create a new command line. And you'll notice there's a command line with a factory. What does that do? Well, I don't know what it does, actually. But the command, I know what that is. That's this. And the factory is something Pico CLI has figured out. Pico CLI and the extension has figured out. And you know what? I want to use whatever it did, because I don't know what it is. I don't want to know what it does. I just want to use it. Because, you know, laziness is good. You don't need to figure everything out if something perfectly good works. So we're going to say that's our factory. We're still using CDI here. It's magic. So we've got our thing injected, so we know what the factory is. When I have a command line that I'm creating, there's some other fun things I can do with the command line directly. Like I can say, because I'm forgiving to my sister, right? I don't want my sister to be fussing with case sensitivity. Who wants that? No, you're not going to be fussy about case sensitivity, because that's silly. And then I want to set the execution strategy, because I want to control how that executes. And I'm going to say it's this. Set execution strategy. This. It's that method. Do that. And then we're going to run it. And you're going to pass in the args that came in as an argument. Whoops. Correct side of the parentheses help. That's how it's going to run. Quarkus application will do the static main things. Magic stuff will happen. It'll set up the jar for me. It's going to come in. It'll call this run method. My run method will set up the command line. And it'll run my stuff. And I think it already did in the test passed. That's amazing. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. That's pretty cool. So the other thing that I want to do to get ready for future commands, I already did this show usage, and you can see that, oh, I think it didn't run because I didn't inject the spec thing. There's going to be a command error. The other thing that we can pass in is this spec, because it's a command spec, I think. Yes, this. We're going to inject this. This is the other thing that Pico CLI figures out. There, now it runs. There, you saw it. It just runs. It's happy. So that shows the usage again. So like if I run this command, if I run it, I don't know if I can run it. I did run it. Where did it go? My test runs it. This test runs it, right? So I have that basic test running, and it is showing the usage, right? I'm silly. It's right there. So it's showing my new, what have you got in your pockets? It's showing, oh, that's right. I changed that in Magic Land. That's part of what came out of the oven. I did set a header. So I have a header set, and so that's why it shows up nicely. What have you got in your pockets? And it shows pockets. There's my brief. There's my debug. New options that showed up. Help options. All that stuff is there. Yay. That's great. And then the one other thing that I need, remember I said that we want everything to use, we want everything to be able to use this. So we're going to make something that allows people, the other commands, to get this TUI class, right? We only have one of them, but it's a producer method, so as I get down to making other commands, they'll just get this thing by default, and we will carry on. So, okay, we've got a CLI that works. I think we want to get to like adding a pocket, right? My God, we've been talking for, oh my God, a long time, and we're not even adding a pocket yet. So we're going to skip ahead. So we got that. You can see I've got a bunch of new files that just popped in because who wants to watch me make files? Nobody does. We're going to, I've moved some things. I created a base command that does the spec and the TUI and show the usage because, who wants to write that 20 times? We're going to skip that part. And with the create command now, I have a test for that. Running test-a-thon. It's already create test. Now we're going to try to create a test that has a launch parameter. Again, I like testing like, the boneheaded one. You don't need any parameters. I want it to work. But I'm doing a basic I'm not even going to look at what the answer is. I just want to make sure it returns properly, right? So we've detected 3 tests. 3 tests are passing. But I didn't actually give it a parameter. That's actually a problem because it just ran my normal pockets command. That's not what I wanted. I want to see, I'm going to show you why I'm going to call this C, but I want to invoke a create command. And my create command is going to be imaginatively called C. Now it fails. That's what's supposed to happen because I didn't tell anybody what this create command was and we didn't actually really make one. So we're going to go into this create method. We're going to make this a command. We have the command annotation just like before. We have a name. I'm going to make it C. I will show you why, I promise. We're also going to make aliases because, brains. And we're going to say the long form so that we remember what this is. And we're going to make a header. And we're going to say create new pocket. Okay, great. Perfect. We have a command, but it doesn't do anything. It's got the usage thing in it. Blah, blah, blah. Lots of errors. Oh, it's because Pocket CLI doesn't know what this is. Oh, it doesn't know what this is. We got to go here. We got to go to the tippy top. And we're going to say, dude, you have subcommands. This is an array. Pocket create class. And we need a comma. We're going to do that, running the tests. And it passes. More than that, this is why I put the C as the name. Because I like it, because it's nice and tidy. The first column is one character, because all your other ones are going to be all weird. I don't know. That's the OCD. I don't know. We can go now to this test. So we got our pocket create. That all worked. Test passes. I want to show help because I like testing to make sure my usage command comes out. Because yes, that is experience-based. I totally did have a help method that I forgot to test that it showed the usage instructions, and it didn't. So yes, pain. Learn with pain. And so it's going to run that. You can see what the help looks like. Pockets C. That's my create. And create a new pocket. It has all the arguments because we use the inherit scope. So it's got all the arguments from before. I didn't have to add any of that stuff. It just magically appeared. So that's great. But now we want to do, okay, this is going to be crazy. I'm going to skip a lot. So usable defaults, right? My sister does not want to enter a bunch of stuff in order to use things. So I'm going to tell you to trust me a little bit. I have an index.json that defines default backpacks and baskets and chests and bags of holding and all kinds of interesting things. I have an item reference that has some attributes. The important thing that we need to know is we have pretty names and we have slugs. Who knows how GitHub makes slugs for headers? It's that premise, right? Strip special characters, everything goes to lowercase, and then you're fine. Pockets have some special attributes at the top. They have emoji, they have whether or not they're extra dimensional. This is like a reference stuff. And I have, importantly, I have types of emoji because that's extra fun. So I got that. That gives me defaults. Defaults are good. I need to add that to my pocket. I need to initialize that. And actually, it's not just going to be create that needs that. It's going to be all kinds of things because I'm going to reference these things everywhere. So I'm actually going to get this index here. It's my index. Why are you not finding my index? Well, whatever. We're going to figure you out later. We're going to have an index. There, this one. And it's going to take that TUI because it is occasionally going to give error messages, right? So we're going to provide it that. We're going to go down to our init method because we know where that's going to initialize before things. So we're going to let the index initialize at that time. So it's going to be pre-populating its cache of information before things run. And then we also want to do the same thing here with the produces. And it'll get the index. Super. Oops, I need parens because those help. Perfect. So now if we get create, the best part is, if this ran again, which it should have. Oh, there's a flag I want to turn on. Run, run, run. Let's go down to the bottom. If we go to our create test here, and we add another parameter. Let's add debug. It'll run again. Here we are in init. Here we are in the shutdown. There's our index. Okay, so it's already read our pockets. We've got 13 of them to play with. That's cool. We're going to now go into, oh, we got another thing to do first. Jeez Louise. We're going to save this, which means we need, who can fill in the blank? We need an entity. Good grief. It's like JPA all over again, which it totally is. So we need to make this pocket an entity. Future me prefers to be explicit. Convention over configuration is absolutely a thing, but future me can never remember what that is. So future me hates that. Future me likes it when I am plain and obvious because then I don't have to remember things. I don't know if anybody else takes as much pity on future me as I do, but future me does not like mysteries. That's the pocket table, like so. And then I don't have to remember. See, I can hover over that and I can remember its pocket and I don't have to think about it, remember what magic did. So that sets it up as an entity. You can see I have this pocket ref there. Can't be null. We know what that is. That's the link to that other thing. So I can remember where it came from. Now, I told you briefly, because I'm trying to go through time, we want names. We want these names to be like slugs. We know how this works. Oh, I need this to extend panache. Who's heard of panache? Panache lets you do, I can do panache entity. Panache helps you do like Ruby on Rails style active record. Gives me an ID, gives me get entity manager, doing persistence, like all kinds of stuff is what panache gives you, and you don't have to write any of that stuff, it's just magically there. So I can do pockets, I can come in here, I can give myself overrides of persist and persistent flush, so I can make sure that my rule works. That my slug is always the same as my name, and this just magically works. I also want to add a find by name method, because the find by name method is what's going to also look up based on that slug. I've got a little bit of things going on here. You'll see the other thing that I'm doing is I'm doing a little bit of a starts with for the pocket. So my sister doesn't necessarily have to type the whole pocket name. She might get a list of what matches, right? So she can remember. I don't know that she'll ever get to thousands of pockets, but I thought that was a nice touch. We're going to set up the data source. So Quarkus dev mode and Quarkus generally have some nice setup for how you work with Quarkus. There is a difference between test mode, drop and create. It'll reset the table so you have a nice consistent set for all of your running your tests. With dev mode, I don't actually want to do that. I want it to remember what I was doing. Import SQL is a quick thing to do. This is how I set up that table. So this is what my table looks like. I've got the pocket ref, the name, the slug, whether or not it's extra dimensional, and like what my defaults are. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. I'm going to just do this again. We're not going to lose anything. I just have stuff coming in that is happening in the background to make things happen prettily. So we've got that. In my pocket create now, I want that index, right? Because that's how I'm going to get my happy fun defaults. So I want that index. It's an injected thing. I've got the index thing. That's coming in. I want, we'll list the types. So my sister can pick types. So that's great. We'll have a types option. This is going to be, you can see what it says. It actually indicates that it's a help option, even though it's not. What that means is anything that's actually required, in the case that she specifies type as an option, it's going to stop verifying required attributes and it will exit early, which is exactly what I want, actually. So we got to override our callable. That's great. We got the exit code that's going to be returned because that's friendly. We know that that's good. We're also then going to add our show types. So if we get that parameter, we've got a method on the index that will list those types very nicely. So we'll do that. And then I'm going to skip that. We're going to add, now this is a little clever, argument groups. If I add an argument group, that creates, if I show help now, it should be running. Let's do, I've got to save this. That helps when I save it. I've got the help thing running. Where did it go? Maybe I didn't. Let's go to our CLI test. Debug. I've got help running. Oh, but I didn't maybe show it. It should be showing that. Where did it go? That's Pocket C with help. I think. We've got the types to exit. We've got this argument group. I will show you in a minute. I think I'm just going to do something else. We've got required parameters. This is going to make some things blow up. But we want to show, I want my sister to be able to say what the pocket ref is, which is why we wanted to show the types. What kind of thing is this? So we're going to have parameters. Notice the index that says positionally, that's the first one. That's great. I also want her to have an optional name. I'm going to take pity on her and say, well, I don't want her to have to remember that if it's multiple words in a row that she needs to use, I don't want her to have to remember that she needs to use double quotes, because, that's a pain. So we're just going to do something where we're going to say, this is interesting. I've got a name. It's optional. I'm using a method to set it. So it's just like you do with REST sometimes where you have a parameter. What else does that? Jackson. Sometimes when you're doing Jackson, you can annotate the method instead of the field. So here we're doing the thing, and we're going to say whatever that list of words were, we're going to join them all together with spaces, and that's going to be our name. And then we want to try creating and saving that pocket. And I will tell you now it's going to fail because there's some other things we have to do. I realize I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to have to skip ahead a lot. You know what? Let's just skip ahead. Let's skip to, let's skip ahead. Let's just skip way ahead. 6. We're going to skip way ahead. Don't save that. We're going to skip way ahead. So if we go to Pocket Create, what we needed was, this is just like on the server side. We needed to say it was transactional. This is just like the server. When you're on the server side and you want a transactional method, you still end up having to do that. What we ended up doing, or what we needed to do in Pocket CLI itself, this is a difference with the server. When you're in a server, you have a place where it activates the request context for you. Container handles it most of the time, right? Anytime you're using REST, a container handles making it transactional, starting that request context. We had to do it ourselves, but there's an annotation we can use to do that in Quarkus, and so we set up that request context right at the beginning, which means normal JPA annotations work to save our stuff. If I start, I'm just going to quit this. There's a bug. There's a bug in here with the way command mode works, and if I do testing, then I don't have my CLI anymore, and it's annoying. So the one thing I want to do, let's skip ahead one more. Let's go to 7. I'm going to skip ahead one more. It should rebuild anyway. So I don't know that it did. I'm just going to redo it. What I want to do now is try to put things Well, that's items in the pocket. So we should have pockets working now. We've got panache, we've got transactions. You can see I have a create and I have a list. I can edit command here. I can add a command that says help. It'll run it. We know what that looks like. I can edit again and I can say create help. And you can see this is that argument group. This is what I wanted to show you before. That argument group makes a nice set with pocket attributes, right? So I can show these related arguments together. It can also let me do exclusive arguments. So if I have some group where it's like you can only do this one or this one, I can put them in an argument group and say they're exclusive, and pockets will enforce, like the Pico CLI will enforce it for me, and I didn't have to do anything. So it's a nice display, right? It gets this constraints there. You can see I've got options for magic and weight and volume, and they're all optional because I've got smart defaults. So I can create, oops, I did it again. I do that every time. I do this, I can do a create. Damn it. There's a bug where if like get in the wrong mode, then it can't text anymore. We know what the bug is. I just didn't want to change my demo because I didn't think it would work. So, you know, whatever. I can edit the command line args. I can create a backpack. Grandma's backpack. Oh, what did I do? Unbalanced. Oh, it didn't like it. That's great. Oops. That's awesome. I forgot about that. I can do create. Let's not do it that way. Let's do a backpack and just say treats for grandma. I love that. Okay. It'll run it. I got my little thing, treats for grandma. I can edit that. I can say list. And it'll show me I have treats for grandma. It'll give me the emoji that it's cute. It's a backpack. Yes, it's ridiculous. So that's what the kind of thing we can do. It can show me that. I'm pretty sure I already edited this, so I can say list. I think if I do treats, it should find it. Yeah, treats for grandma, and it tells me treats for grandma's empty. Remember, taking pity on my sister, just let her type little pieces, right? If I skip ahead again, and we're going to fast forward, we've got the same kind of patterns for items. And I've got a bunch of stuff in here about how to make this pretty for how to display things. But if I do help now, you should have even more commands. List, create, delete, edit, add, move, update. So you can keep adding these subcommands. Now you see why I like that first letter as the name. It's nice and consistent. I can pick them out. None of them are redundant. You can type quickly. I can add. I can do an add. So let's do edit the command line. I can add to, I do, for this case, use the backpack as the ID. Add one. I can say jelly beans. And I'm going to say they have a value of, these are really expensive jelly beans, 5 gold pieces. And it'll show treats for grandma contains, with the ID of 2, 1, it's only 1 jelly bean. I didn't say it was many. But it's 5 gold pieces is the value. Right, so I can do that and get the display. Because of the way I have my TUI set up, because of the way it has a formatter, I'm in a consistent place to make these little ASCII tables with emojis. Pico CLI is doing a lot of work for me. So is JPA. So is Quarkus. This is usual Hibernate stuff, Hibernate validator, all of the stuff you already know. That index JSON that I read that had all of these types in it because of smart defaults, right? That's parsed using Jackson. Standard thing you know how to use. How much time do we have left? We're done, right? Soon? Do you guys have questions? I could keep going for hours because I'm having fun making ridiculous things for my sister. Well, you know what I want to add is the thing that if you add the bag of holding to the other one, that it blows up, because that'd be funny. Totally surprise her, but she'd probably get mad. But I do want to add stuff like that. I have another version of this that does prompting. So like if she doesn't specify a pocket reference, it will go and ask her for the pieces, so she can have a custom pocket that has all the things, but you know, getting the prompting to work. Are you ready? Okay, so the tests can run. I don't know what else to tell you. It's really nice, a nice environment for writing and iterating and working on building a CLI. It's really effective. I've written CLIs to do, like I worked on the Quarkus CLI, which does all of that stuff. I've written on a Yes, I've written a CLI that generates, like, reads from XML things and Dungeons and Dragons reference material, because, you know, whatever. Done that. I know actually a lot of people who do either use JBang with Pico CLI and Quarkus, or Spring has support for Pico CLI also. So these Pico CLI tricks, they're not unique to Quarkus. You can use them with other frameworks. But it just makes scripting, if you know Jackson really well, for example, you don't have to go write a script in Perl to convert your JSON, right? Use the thing you know. You can use XML libraries that you know. I do have a CLI written that uses the Saxon XML parser, because I go XML to JSON and XML to Markdown.